All right, everyone. Well, welcome. I hope that you have taken this opportunity to sleep in, give yourself a break from having to show up at 8 or 9 o'clock for stats on this Wednesday. And I also apologize that I will not get to play the song for the day. If I did so, I'm certain that YouTube would give me a copyright strike. So let's go ahead and get started. And that's going to be with following up on trying to convince you that this class is worthwhile, that it's going to be okay, that it's going to be perhaps even fun. This extra piece is something that I think should put some doubts that people have to rest. A lot of people are afraid of math. They don't really get along well with algebra. They don't really like the big numbers. They don't like working with big, messy equations and hoping that they get all of the factoring right and all that stuff. That's not what's going on in this class. This is not really a math class. Indeed, statisticians are pretty distinct from a lot of other topics that somebody would cover in a math department. In fact, Chris Kennedy over in the math department, I did a little bit of work with his wife, who is also a mathematician, because she needed some help with stats. And I'm not really a high-level expert by any means, but they needed my help. So this is really not so much a math class. This is a logic class. There is a logic to what happens when you observe a few numbers out of a larger set of numbers, and what values those numbers and the averages and standard deviations of those numbers are probably going to be. Okay, so if you follow along with the logic, that's great. The formulas will be available to you the whole time. They'll take care of themselves. Now, another thing, because this is a logic class, is this: in order to make this as effective and hopefully as easy as possible for you, I'm going to go into a great deal of detail about why the logic of the stuff that we are doing actually makes sense. All right? It would be a lot quicker for me to just tell you what to do and say, follow this algorithm or follow this procedure. And to be honest, there was a certain amount of that in Math 125 when it came to doing hypothesis tests. It was breezed right over. They said, here's a couple of different variations, move on. I'm going to go over those in painstaking detail and tell you why each one of the steps in those hypothesis tests actually made sense, why they are the way they are, what they were doing, and how they help us to reach our conclusions. Okay. So for example, this list of numbers that we have right here, 1, 3, 7, 15, 31, 63, 127. If those were numbers that I was asking you to just memorize with no association with each other at all, then you might have a long night of flashcards and stuff to try to remember them and try to get yourself ready to memorize them on the test. And each one of these little bits of information disconnected from the other would take up basically another memory slot in your head. However, if I gave you the reason why those numbers were the way that they were, you would basically only have to remember one thing, and all of those numbers would flow naturally when it came time for the test. So 1, 3, 7, 15, 31, 63, 127. Sure, those are numbers you could memorize. But if I said, what I'm doing is doubling the last number and adding 1, you could generate all those numbers for yourself, no problem, in the moment. All right. So I'm going to be focused not just on getting people to do the process, but in understanding why the process is the way it is, both in an effort to help you memorize it and also to help you remember how to interpret it when the time comes after you're done with this class. All right. Another thing that I like to say when I start classes is that I am definitely here for you. I definitely have a job. I definitely have a role. Of course I do. I'm in charge of the class. I'm evaluating you. But I cannot do the work for you. I'm really more of a cheerleader or perhaps a personal trainer at a gym. You, as a student, have not bought results. You have bought a membership. You have bought the ability or the chance or the opportunity to achieve results. So this classroom is like a gym for statistics, and I am like a personal trainer. But if you do not take advantage of the gym, if you do not take advantage of the personal trainer, if you do not use the equipment, you will not see the results that you want. And that won't be really a problem for me. That's fine. You are likely the one who is disappointed. And so I'm not into personal judgment. I know that a lot of people have things that they just cannot get away from, that they cannot perform well in a semester and handle in their personal lives at the same time. So no judgment from me, of course, but if you can't perform the mastery of the material that we're covering here in class, then it'll reflect in your grade. And the worst thing that can happen is that you would have to take the class again. And plenty of people have done so. You can ask them. It's really not the worst thing in the world. All right, as long as I'm lecturing about things that aren't technically the material, I do have to share with you a couple of experiences that I've had, and a warning, just basically not to do it, okay? You are going to have opportunities to bring a lot of material with you to the exams. That packet that I gave you at the beginning, the how-to packet, I am going to allow you to bring that packet and reference it when you are taking all of my exams, 1, 2, 3, and the final. In addition, I will allow you to reference any notes that you want to take on the pieces of paper in that packet. So that should prepare you as much as you could possibly be prepared ahead of the fact to reference things that you think are important. Okay? That keeps me from having to worry about whether you're looking at something that is or isn't approved or cheating. You know what? If you think it's important enough and you think about it before the fact and you know that it's worth knowing and you know that it's worth writing down, you can take a look at it in your packet. That process, by the way, of figuring out what's important enough to write down, what you want to include in your packet, is called studying. And it usually results in somebody who doesn't need to reference their packet because they've so meticulously thought out about what they want to include. So that's what goes for tests. I will be giving people different versions of tests when you take an exam in my class. Therefore, if you are tempted to take a look at somebody else's paper that you can see, you run the risk of putting an answer down that is incorrect for your test, but correct for a version of the test that you don't have. That sticks out like a sore thumb to me, and that's somebody that I flag for a conversation about the potential that they were cheating. And if it's egregious enough, it's obvious that somebody was cheating on a test, and I take it seriously. I'm not punitive. I'm not get joy out of punishing people, but I find my job to be important. I like doing it. It gives me meaning. And somebody who cheats on my tests really kind of diminishes that for me. So I do take it seriously. The more common thing, though, that has happened a couple of times over the last few semesters. I give an extra credit assignment for people to do towards the end of the semester. And a couple of people have taken that assignment and posted it to Chegg or some other kind of study assistant site, whatever you want to call it. Chegg is a thinly veiled service for having other people do your homework. Nevertheless, what happened then was that people submitted the extra credit problem that I posted to Chegg. A supposed expert on Chegg got back to them with a solution. And there were a couple of things that made me very aware that this is what had happened. First of all, the solution was wrong. Second of all, and everybody who did this with Chegg gave me the wrong solution, and they all gave me the same wrong solution. Very difficult to overlook. The other thing is, for this particular example, people were giving me a method and a notation with which I'm personally not familiar. I certainly didn't teach it in class, and you certainly didn't learn it in this class. So I had to report and bust and whatever you want to call it a few people. It was really kind of a pain in the butt and created bad feelings. I don't enjoy it at all. If you are going to use a tutor or a homework help site, whatever it is, here's how I draw the line between someone who's giving you assistance and someone who is joining you in the act of cheating. If you can explain to me what your work means, if you can explain how the process went, then I know that it's in your head and you have it. You own it. Even if somebody else helped you to get it in there, no problem. That's fine. I love tutors. I love people studying in groups. I love people studying together, creating materials together. That's fine. Collaboration is great. But if somebody else's brain is holding the comprehension for you, that's academic dishonesty. So you have to understand the work that you produce, even if somebody helped you produce it, no problem. Okay? All right. A couple of nuts and bolts about how to do things in class. I know I mentioned these in-class assignments a little bit before, but 10 days out of the semester are set aside where the only thing we're going to do that day is have you sit with your groups and do a practice problem over some procedure or topic that we had just covered. People find this actually to be the most useful part of the class. They often tell me that they really didn't understand or really didn't grasp what it is that we were doing until they did it themselves in their group. So I find this to be really valuable because other people find it to be really valuable. 10 of those are available over the course of the semester. I know that sometimes life happens. I know that people oversleep. Anything. It doesn't really matter. I'm setting aside 2 of those days to drop in case you can't be there. All right. So I've built in the flexibility. That's fine. You don't have to tell me about it. You don't have to convince me that it was a legitimate reason. I'm out of the judgment game. 2 of those you can miss before you start taking a penalty. Okay. So show up for all of them if you want to benefit from the learning. That's great. Show up for 8 of them if you want to do the bare minimum without losing points, but be very careful. Missing a couple at the beginning of the semester leaves you unprepared for unexpected circumstances later in the semester, and that's how people sometimes get burned. All right, so that's the in-class assignment work. The in-class assignment work, by the way, is designed to be very generous with credit, right? Each one of them is worth 30 points. Groups who sit down and generate answers, even if some of those answers are wrong, will typically get almost 30 points just by virtue of the fact that they did the task. All right. So this is, in my philosophy of teaching, kind of establishing a base set of participation, engagement points above which people will distinguish themselves from each other by how well they do on the test. So make sure that you don't miss these. Make sure you take these seriously. These are largely free points. All right. Another set of almost free, but not quite points is the SPSS assignment work. I'm not really interested in making you computer programmers. I'm not interested in getting you to plug in your assignments to another machine, which will then do all of the work for you. That's a really good way to skip over the logic of what you're doing. I don't think it's very useful. So I want to teach a little bit about SPSS, but I don't really want to dedicate any class time to it. So here's what I do. All right. On 6 different occasions over the course of the semester, after we've done an in-class assignment that is doable also in SPSS, I will put up on Scholar an SPSS assignment. All of these SPSS assignments will use the spreadsheet from the data set that you all made with the questionnaires that you submitted to me earlier this week. Right? So I'll ask you about number of hours that you sleep, what your average GPA was, all that other kind of stuff from data that you provided to me. And we'll have SPSS analyze it for a bunch of hypothesis tests and stuff. Okay? You will use the same data set, the same data file for all 6 assignments. There won't be a new one every time an assignment drops. When that assignment shows up, you will have 1 week to finish it and turn it in by midnight of 7 days afterwards. And then that'll be your SPSS assignment. They cannot come in late because I put the answers up immediately and automatically as soon as it's due. If you miss one, no problem. That's fine. I'm only going to count 5 of them. If you miss 2, that's kind of on you. All right. We'll give you a lot more details about this. I'll show you how to install it. You can get it on your own machines, your own computers, but that's a topic for another day. All right. So far I've gone over everything that's going to count 4 points in the class. Doing the in-class assignments, doing the SPSS assignments, taking the 3 midterms, 1, 2, and 3, and then taking the comprehensive final. Right? The final does, in fact, cover everything that we've done in the class. I think it's appropriate for this class. I don't always give comprehensive finals, but I think that's really appropriate here in stats. Okay? I want to just say right off the bat, before it even applies to anybody in particular, that other things that aren't these grades don't count for your grade. I cannot or will not, perhaps I could, but I won't, give points for people who consistently showed up. That should be worth it on its own to get the material. If you did a lot of practice problems, doesn't really matter. If your grade improved over the course of the semester, great. If it fell over the course of the semester, shame, but you're still getting the same number of points that you got by adding up all of your assignments, okay? Your subjective experience of how well you did in the class doesn't make a difference. It's the objective assessment through the tests and stuff that I'm giving you that determines your grade. I've also been very careful to make this something that doesn't have any fuzzy gray or rounding error by the time that we finish up the course. The course has 1,000 points, whole number points. There are cutoffs for each grade level in whole number points. So if you have 799 points, you are in the C+ range, not the B- range. I do that to keep people from thinking that they just didn't push hard enough or they might regret not making an argument. It's okay. There are no arguments. You'll get the grade that you get. Your text. Your text is, I'm really very fond of it. Students are very fond of it. As I said in class, it's very conversational. It holds your hand. It walks you very slowly through the things that we're learning. If students find themselves off track, getting lost in class, a really good way for them to catch up has been to reconnect with reading the book. Okay. It is in its 5th edition, I think. That is the last edition. We will not be having any more editions of this book, but the 3rd, 4th, 5th, each one of them are fine. They haven't made big enough changes in those editions to make any real difference in the class. So pick up a used copy, get an electronic copy online, and you might want to hang on to this one for later on in your career. My development book, no, give it back. Just rent it, sell it back. Introductory psych, yeah, whatever. Things are going to change, don't. But stats, it's pretty much going to stay the way it always has been, the way it is, and it might be a good reference book for later on. All right, other stuff in the syllabus. This is strange to most people. It's the only class I do this in. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit unique. If you find yourself unable to take an exam, one of the midterms, what I tend to do is by default not offer a makeup. You will get the average of your other 3 exams for that exam. So if you miss exam 2, I will take the weighted average of exam 1, exam 3, and the final, and use that average to predict what you would have gotten on exam 2. Okay? Just makes it easier for me, makes it easier for everybody not to have alternative forms and making sure that people aren't sharing information. It's all very messy. We can just do it this way because you will be held accountable for all the material in this class because it's all going to be on the final, and you can't miss the final. If you don't take the final, you'll get it incomplete, which is not a problem, and you'll take the final early in the next semester, and we'll get it all wrapped up then. Okay? I also talked to you about the extra credit problem. That's worth up to 2%. So if you're worried that you're going to be disappointed because you're right at the cutoff for the next grade, take the extra credit. That'll put 20 points on. And so if you were within 2% of the next grade, it'll bump you over. Okay? There's the deal. No other extra credit that was available. I don't create extra credit opportunities for people who decided how much work they needed to do at the end of the semester. It's not fair to you. It might be fair to you, but it's not fair to your classmates, and it's certainly not something that I want to engage in. Okay. Also, the Scholar page, it is chock full of everything that I've done to be helpful over the years that I've been teaching this class. Your SPSS assignments will be there as quizzes, so you will see, read, and submit them, as well as get your data set from the Scholar page. And Any readings, if I have some chapters or something that I want to post, I'll put them up there. Not typical, it's in your book, but I might. How-to slides. Everything that was in your how-to packet is also posted online if you want to print out another copy. My lectures, I have printed them all out to PDF and put them up online so that if you want to print them out and follow along as you take notes, you can do that. You don't have to worry about copying down all the formulas and everything and all the notes that are up on the screen. You can have a hard copy of everything that I'm going to put up on the screen and make your own notations next to it. I think it's probably a pretty good way to go. When you do an in-class assignment, I will post very shortly after you're done a key with all the answers to the assignment that you just done, so you can now use it as a study aid, as a study guide, as a practice homework. I have all the tables that we use for finding critical values for all the tests, the hypothesis tests that we'll do. I have lists of topics that are going to be covered on the test for every single chapter. I have the formula sheets that I'll be giving you for the exams already posted, so you know what information is going to be available to you in terms of formulas that you don't have to worry about writing down. There are practice problems for everything that we cover. I've got a practice problem set that you are free to do on your own, not for a grade, not for credit, but if you want some extra practice doing it on your own by yourself, those are up on the Scholar page as well. And when it comes time to doing SPSS, people need a little bit of guidance, know how to work that program. I have videos showing you exactly how to do all the things I'm asking you to do in SPSS under the page SPSS help videos, okay, or SPSS tutorials. So there's a lot of stuff up there. There's even more that I'm not even talking about, but it's a really great place to go if you find yourself getting behind, getting lost, needing some guidance, as well as I. But, you know, I might point you to the website a lot. Thank you. If you haven't done the questionnaire yet, please get that into me by the end of the week. That's when I'll shut it down and download it to start analyzing the data for the SPSS assignments. All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about how statistics differs from everything that you've ever done. Now, you've taken Math 125, I know, but this kind of theoretical difference may or may not have been pointed out to you. But when we used to deal with numbers, when things were simple, okay, when life was easy, we'd do something like this. We'd give you an example of something that you could count, and then we would say, count it and give me the answer. And then you could say something like, if you had twice as many of those, what would that be? And you go, oh, it's 4. Okay, this is how numbers used to work. If there are 2 watermelons, then when you count them, the answer is 2. It's never 0, it's never 1, it's never 3, 4, or 5. It's 2 every single time. And if you counted them again, you'd get 2 again. Very nice, well-behaved numbers. But statistics gets us into a world where taking the same measurement, asking the same question, doing the same count multiple times will end up giving you multiple answers. And that's what makes it a variable. It varies. Sometimes you get this answer, sometimes you get a different answer. So instead of putting 2 watermelons on the table and saying how many watermelons, I might ask you, hey, how many watermelons fit in a truck? Well, you take a truck and start putting watermelons on it. And when it's full, you stop and you count the watermelons. But I didn't say that it had to be the same truck every time. I didn't say that it had to be the same watermelons every time. I didn't say that it had to be the same scale of the packer every time. There are a whole bunch of things that will affect how many watermelons you can fit in that truck. So every time you do it, you might get a different number of watermelons, but you're still answering the same question. That's what a variable is. When you measure it more than once and you get a different answer at least once, what you're doing is dealing with a variable. Now, it's not a variable if it doesn't change, and it's not a variable if you don't measure it. Okay? So, if you have 2 more values in something that you have measured for your study, then it's a variable. So if I was saying I took 100 vehicles and I measured what kind of vehicle it was and how many watermelons it could hold maximum, Some of these things are going to be variables, but some of them are not. Type of fruit, is that going to be a variable? Well, it's not. I used watermelons every single time. Size of fruit, maybe, but I'm not asking fit apples in one, watermelons in another, bananas in another. It's watermelons every time, so it doesn't vary, not a variable. Number of watermelons, absolutely. That's the entire point of dealing with variables, because I'll fit more into one car than I will into another car, and maybe more in the same car at time A than time B. So that's going to be a variable. That's really what we're interested in. Here's a tricky one. Gender of driver of vehicle. Variable? No. And here's why. If I measured it, if I made it something of interest in my study, I almost certainly would get some people of different genders driving the cars. But I didn't measure it. It's not something that I wrote down. It's not something that I paid attention to. So just like the color of the vehicle, it might have varied had I measured it, but I didn't. Okay. And then lastly, the type of vehicle. Yes, I said that I was paying attention to what kind of vehicle was being packed with watermelons. I'm writing it down. It's in my study. And so, yeah, that's a variable. All right. So you got some idea about what that is. The rest of the class is going to be paying attention to how they behave under different circumstances. All right. And this is one of those variables. When you start measuring them repeatedly, which is what we do again and again and again, they will not give you an answer like over there on the left. They will give you a distribution of answers. Some of the answers will typically be more common. Some will be less common, but they will vary. So if I measured 10 times the number of watermelons that fit in like a basket, I might get 0 once. It's a huge watermelon. I don't know. I got 1 watermelon twice. I got 2 watermelons 5 times. I got 3 watermelons 3 times, and I got 5 watermelons twice. Okay. Under no circumstances could I fit only 4. That means that I was dealing with a variable, and this, I'll introduce it right away here because it's coming up, is what's known as a frequency distribution. It tells me which answers I got and how often I got those answers. All right. So when you're dealing with a variable and you're counting up how often you got results when you measured one variable, you can put it in this, which is called a frequency distribution. All right. I'm going to save levels of measurement. All right, we're far enough along. I just wanted to make sure we didn't get too far behind today. But we will pick up at this slide when we get back together on Friday. Again, enjoy your day. I hope I'm feeling fine. I really ought to be. It's no big deal. By the time we get back together on Friday, if you have any questions, please go ahead and email me. Take care.